In our last video, we basically defined what price elasticity is. Price elasticity is simply a sensitivity analysis on consumers' reaction to a change in price. How will their demand change if you change price? Now, what we're going to do, and I don't mean to confuse you, there are many different determinants of demand, or in other words, there are many things that determine how much consumers demand of a product. But there are also what we call determinants of elasticity, which is there are things that could make people more or less sensitive to a change in price when we talk about price elasticity. So what are things that can make you more sensitive to a change in price? Well, in the book, it talks about four things of note. One, if a good is a necessity or luxury, that can have a big impact on your reaction to a change in price. The logic goes necessities, consumers are much more insensitive to a change in price or price inelastic. Since you need it, if the price goes up, you're going to pay. Luxuries, on the other hand, consumers are more sensitive to a change in price because if the price goes up, demand tends to drop a lot because if you don't need it, it's a luxury, you could do without it if the price goes up. Availability of substitutes. If a new substitute comes online, your sensitivity to a change in price of a particular product will change dramatically. Let's say, think about the iPhone let's say, from 2007 to 2012 or 13. People who bought an iPhone, they were very price inelastic. In other words, if Apple raised the price, demand didn't drop that much. But when you got some new players on the market that are producing phones very close, if not superior to the iPhone, let's say like Samsung, HTC, Google, and so forth, that makes the iPhone consumers more sensitive to a change in price of the iPhone. Relative price to income. This is one is not as intuitive as the others. What relative price to income means is if a good's price is very low relative to your income, when you have changes in price, you're not going to react to it that much. But if price continues to go up and the price relative to your income is a much larger percentage, any small change in price, you're going to have a big reaction to. So think about, I don't know, the price of salt. How much a month do you spend on salt? Not much, I would suppose. So if price of salt went up by 20%, you may not change your demand for salt because you don't consume that much on a monthly basis. So you don't spend that much. Well, what if your rent increases by 20%? Well, since your rent relative to your income is a much higher percentage than the price of salt to your income, a 20% change in rent is going to cause a much bigger reaction than a 20% change in the price of salt. And then finally, time. If you have more time to make a decision, you tend to be more sensitive to a change in price because if price goes up, you're going to switch or find alternatives because you have time to plan around that price change. If you don't have much time and the price goes up, you may have no choice but to pay the higher price. So you're relatively insensitive to a change in price when you have very little time to adjust. So again, we talked about these necessities for these luxuries. Demand for necessities tends to be inelastic. Demand for luxuries tends to be more sensitive or more elastic. And availability of substitutes, the more options you have, the more sensitive you are to a change in price. And then again, the higher the price relative to your income, the more sensitive you will be to a change in price. And then time. The more time you have to make a change, the more sensitive you will be to a change in price. Now, let's look at the relationship between price and total revenue. And the way I can explain this is with my special rubber band theory. This is really the rubber band example, but I put theory there so it sounds a little more impressive. So what is the rubber band theory? Well, what we're going to do is I'm going to set it up like this. I'm first going to draw or write the formula for total revenue. Total revenue is going to be equal to the price you charge multiplied by the number of units that you sell. So P times Q. And below that, I'm going to draw a giant P and a giant TR. Now, what if I increase price? Increase price. And what if demand dropped a lot? When I say a lot, notice how this arrow is much larger in relationship to the price increase. So if you raise price a little bit and you lose most of your customers, you would expect your total revenue to fall. So I'm going to fall right here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rubber band around these arrows. That's a rubber band. Now picture the arrows moving in the direction they're pointing. And this rubber band is going to stretch. And if the rubber band stretches, we say this good is price elastic. Get it? Elastic stretch. And what if we did the same thing? TR equals P times Q, big P, big TR. What if we raise price like before, but demand only fell a teeny bit? Well, if you raise price a lot, and you only lose a few customers, can you imagine how your revenues will actually increase? Let me draw the arrow here, or the rubber band. Notice how the arrows are moving in the same direction. When the arrows move in the same direction, the rubber band does not stretch. So we say this is price inelastic. Get it? Inelastic does not stretch. So when the rubber band stretches, it's elastic. When it doesn't stretch, it's inelastic. But this little memory trick, rubber band theory, is a way for you to demonstrate the relationship between price elasticity and total revenue. So whenever a good is price elastic, that means a price increase. When a good is inelastic, E is less than 1. If you raise price, total revenue will likely increase, so it's inelastic. Notice how the rubber band doesn't stretch? Well, if you raise price and the good is price elastic or greater than 1, the value B is greater than 1, that's like saying price goes up and total revenue goes down. The rubber band stretches, so it's price elastic. And we can see this graphically with this nice graph right here. Watch, this is the next graph. So you can see how if you raise price along this portion of the demand curve, if you raise price, total revenue is going to increase. But if you raise price along this portion of the demand curve, if you raise price, total revenue will let me just back up a little bit. I got this a little bit backwards here. I'm going to erase these. All these lines. Let's start at a low price right here. Low price. If we start raising price, we move along this part. Do you see how we're moving along here, right here? We're moving this way. If we raise price there and we raise price here, we're moving along this portion here too, which means total revenue is increasing. So raise price and total revenue increases. Rubber band does not stretch, it's inelastic. And if you keep raising price, you start to move this way. Total revenue starts to fall. Can you see that? So if you raise price and total revenue falls, the rubber band stretches, it is elastic. So this is just one way of showing the relationship between price elasticity and total revenue. When a good is inelastic, you raise price, total revenue increases. When a good is elastic and you raise price, total revenue decreases. And of course, the reverse is true, right? The reverse is if you lower price and a good is inelastic, revenue will fall. And if you lower price and a good is elastic, total revenue will increase. And this, the rubber band stretches because picture these arrows moving in the direction that they're pointing, and eventually the rubber band will stretch. Now, aside from price elasticity, remember, for every determinant of demand, there is an elasticity. So what about income? Income is a determinant of demand. Well, guess what? There's an income elasticity. If consumers' income changes, how will you react to a change in demand? Well, a lot of it depends upon if it's a normal good or inferior good, right? For normal goods, when you increase price, demand increases. The question is by how much? So let's say this is a normal good. I increase demand, I increase your income. Now we know that when you change a determinant of demand, the demand curve will shift. And in this case, it's going to shift to the right. But by how much? If it shifts a lot, we will say consumers are relatively sensitive to a change in income. Income elastic. If it shifts only a little bit, like this, then we'll say the consumers are relatively insensitive to a change in income. So again, income elasticity is simply a sensitivity analysis as to how sensitive consumers are to a change in income. And the formula looks similar to that of the price elasticity, which is it's the percentage change in coin demanded, just like with price elasticity. But instead of having the percentage change in price in the denominator, we have the percentage change in income. Now, let's go to another type of elasticity, which is cross-price elasticity. That simply looks at, well, if I change the price of good X, how will that impact the demand for good Y? Well, let's say the Coke and Pepsi are the two products. If I increase the price for Coke, you would expect the demand for Pepsi to go up because as price becomes more expensive, people may switch from Coke to Pepsi. Now the question is, will the demand for Pepsi go up like this? Or will the demand for Pepsi go up like this? If there's a small change like this, that we would say this is cross-price inelastic. Inelastic. What does that look like? inelastic. If it goes up like this, we would say it's cross-price elastic. So again, cross-price elasticity looks at how the change in the price of one good impacts the demand of another good. So hopefully this has given you a good overview of what price elasticity is, and that there are many elasticities, but this is a very important concept and it builds upon the law of demand.